this afternoon is perhaps one of the very, very important topics of this Zman, because it relates to issues that in the world of medicine and halacha, anybody who's involved in medicine and halacha has to deal with this, unfortunately, on an ongoing basis. If you notice in the front page on the right-hand side, when I put sugya, I purposely worded the concept of today's discussion, and that is refuah b'makom sakana b'matzav shel chaya yeshua v'chaya olam. The concept we're dealing with today is not the normal concept of refuah medicine, which I described up until this point in time in the last couple of weeks, but it's a unique type of category which, as we get into the topic more in depth, you'll understand the practical ramifications of this type of refuah, in contrast to what we discussed up until this point in time, is dramatically different. In the Marim Makomos, I will tell you, if you look through what I gave you today, I gave you a whole bunch of tshuvas of different gedolim. It's I felt intuitively for all these years that there's a major difference. And Baruch Hashem, I found, as I put this little contrast together with you, that I have a good chavrusa in my concern about the categorization of this topic. And the chavrusa I found when it came to feeling that way is the Tzitz Eliezer Waldenberg from page 8 till 16. I gave you the whole tshuva over here, but I'm going to take certain slices of it. But the fact of the matter is, as I'm going to explain to you very shortly, what we're dealing with today is much different than what we've dealt with up until now. Let me explain to you what I mean. If we think back for a couple of minutes, what we discussed when it came to the makaris of the mitzvah harafuah and the interaction of makaris, I taught you in one of the shiurim a very important yesod of the balatesis of Chaim HaKayim. What I mentioned to you is the following. Since we have multiple makaris for the mitzvah harafuah, and that is the mitzvah hashivosala, the Gemara in Baba Kama in Sanhedrin, mitzad echad, Hashavas Havedus Aguf. And then mitzat sheni, we have the Gemara Baba Kama and Pehei, Rapi Rape, Mikan Shenit and Rishus L'Rafil Rapais. So the question I posed in the name of the Balitesis, and in particular Chaim HaKayim's question, what do we need two makaris for? And if you remember the teretz I gave in his name, and you have it in the major source books itself, is the following: that if we basically assume, as many Rishonim hold, that the major yesod of administering medical help comes under the more klalistic concept of hashivoisa hashavas haguf. And as I showed you, the Rambam said in his Perish L'Mishnais Masechet Sedarim, hashavas havedas haguf has three different formats. It could be done with a person's chachmasa, with his knowledge of medicine. It could be done begufo, by physically rescuing a person with their body, as the Gemara gives, jumping into the water and rescuing people. It could be done even b'mamaino, by paying for people who can't afford medical help, you footing the bill. That's another way of accomplishing hashivoisolo. So it seems in the Rambam's mind, and many other Rishonim, that the primary source for Hatzalah Klalis and all types of Hatzalos, medical and non-medical, comes from that pasuk. The reason you need a special Gzeres HaKasser, Chaim HaKayim says, of Rapi Rape, is I taught you that there's a special uniqueness when it comes to medical care that you don't have by other Hatzalos. And if you remember what I said, I'm sure you remember what I said, I pointed out that by other Hatzalos, when you're using your physical body, and Mani Kedayim, especially using your physical body, the person who is being nitzal, being saved, is not being put into any more sakana when you're doing the hatzalah. The other one who's being put into sakana is the matzel, the person who's trying to save you. In medical care, by definition, whether you're administering very, very dangerous medicines to kill bacteria, to kill disease, to kill cancer, so there's a toxicity problem. Or you're putting a person through very dangerous operative procedures to either transplant new organs in or to cure organs that are there. All these procedures, all types of surgeries by definition, are looked upon as activities of tremendous sakana. Momentarily, you're putting the chol into more sakana than they were to undergo this type of procedure when it comes to undergoing this operative procedure. I mean, just as an example, as a simple dugma, any type of open heart surgery requires a major mechanism to accomplish it. And that is, they have to, in an open heart surgery, put you in a situation that you literally stop your heart to stabilize it and allow them to do whatever surgical procedures there on the heart. They have to momentarily switch over all the heart's functions to a machine that actually acts in place of your heart to allow your heart to undergo the surgery that needs for its tikkunim. I mean, that procedure, switching over from your body system to an artificial system, back and forth, alone is an incredible sakonis nefashos. God forbid what can happen in that interim, going in both directions. So the fact of the matter is, how do we know, as doctors, as medical professionals, I can put the chol in greater sakana than they were for the purposes of ultimate refuah? So that was the chiddush of Chaim HaKohen, and that's why the Gemara says that for refuos, I need a special Rabbi, a divine reshus, for the purposes of putting people in special medical therapeutic care up and above what their sakan is normally because of the sickness. I can even endanger them more for the purpose of their fuos based upon the divine sanction of Rabbi Rabbi. That was the chiddush he articulated. If you remember, I gave that share a couple of weeks ago. And that is an accepted, it's quite obviously, it's an understood phenomenon. And the fact of the matter is there's another yesod when it comes to Rabbi Rabbi, which is mentioned as an adjunct to this. Both the Ramban says it in his Teres Adam, which we read together, as well as many other Rishonim, is that every medical procedure, by definition, everything you do, for some people it will cure them, for other people it might kill them. You know, what is good for one person is not so good for the other person. Sometimes, especially when it comes to medical care and medicines and those types of treatments, the chemicals in the medicine might have a negative reaction to your body and cause your body to, unfortunately, have a negative result. In surgeries, unfortunately, might end up cutting more than you're supposed to cut or actually cut something else. All types of side problems can develop. A person can hemorrhage to death. A person might not be able to recover from the general anesthesia you give a person. All these types of things can happen. So the fact of the matter is, according to the Ramban and other Rishonim, Rabbi tells us that a doctor has to be aware of the fact that even though you're going into a state of sakana, and you might, God forbid, end up killing the patient rather than curing the patient, that can't be your worry and concern not to do the medical care. Hashem gave you the allowance as a doctor, and he gave the patient an allowance as a patient, Rabbi, be conscious for rabbis, to use refuos bedukos, and I defined in the last year what refuos bedukos are, to use refuos bedukos for the purposes of cure, and I shouldn't therefore in my mind think I might kill the patient. If you ultimately kill the patient, ultimately Chazal say that might be the Ratzon Hashem, Shigas Areifi Kavanas Abeirei. You have to use the best expertise you have, the greatest quality expertise you have in the specialty that you have, and do it to the best capacities that you have. Function on a maximal capacity, your mind, your heart, your knowledge, and later on, pray to HaKadosh Baruch Hu that you succeed, but you can't have in back of your mind, because I might, God forbid, kill the person and not succeed, I shouldn't involve myself in this endeavor. Hashem gave you divine wishes to do such, and God forbid, if you don't succeed, have I did a ma'isa aveira? Have I did a terrible sin? So the fact of the matter is, the various types of midrashim chalukos, whether, if God forbid, it seems later on a mistake was made, b'shoigeg, do you have divine culpability? Do you have bezdin monetary culpability? And what's interesting and fascinating, where if you look in the Shulchan Aruch talks, if you tell you b'shoigeg, it might be chai b'din shemayim, that might be a concept called obviously maybe needing to go to Orei Miklo, to Kodema for Kapari, you find these types of Mamarde Chazal. But the other problem you have is I'll show you sugyas and shas that talk about the fact that if a person's involved in doing a mitzvah and summoning a baldin, for instance, to come to a din Torah, it's Gemara Makis, trying to teach a child Torah, and sometimes you give him a little zetz. I'm not talking about you're giving him a death blow, but sometimes you give a child a zetz, and unfortunately the child is more fragile than other children, and he might chalish and Rahman Lissan die as a result of that. So the Gemara says when you be makal l'shem mitzvah, mitzvah is a special patur on orei miklat. It's a special patur on those types of punishment because you were doing l'shem mitzvah. Practicing medicine is surely a mitzvah, So if a person accidentally ends up killing somebody practicing medicine, you should be put from Rabbinical because you're being Isaac b'mitzvah. And many poskim pass in that way. So I found later on that the way the Aruch HaShulchan resolves what seems to be a contradiction over here is this is very simply that when Chazal say that you might be momentarily culpable b'dei Shemayim or b'dei Adam or Mikl Kedoimer, that's when the tos can be demonstrated to have been caused by lo iyin yafeh v'hisrashlis, which means you unfortunately malpractice on a certain level. There you can say, you're a shogeg, I shouldn't have done it, I should have been more careful, but if I did all I possibly could, I was ma'ayin yafeh, and I was not misrashal, and I was Yosek mitzvah the way I should be Yosek mitzvah. Baruch HaShulchan says, in that case, I am scot-free, you've done nothing wrong, you're Yosek mitzvah. And in the Mar Mekamas I handed out today, I want to show you, I'll tell you what page to turn to very quickly. In the Tzitz Eliezer's Tshuva, he quotes on page number 9, the Shalom Eshev of Shal Nathanson, in his Shelos and Tshuvis and his Sefer Divrei Shaul on Yevadeya, and he quotes over here the Ran. And he basically likes the Ran a great deal. And what the Ran basically says, if you look, I'll tell you where to look. He says, where it says D in the text, one line down, he says, Motza she'avas nafsho b'chidush haran l'sanhedrin she'kaisa behedya d'maka adam l'rufua patur umuter. So he says, not only is it a fact that it's a poter of onshim, but it's mutter because that's the whole reason Hashem gave you the din of rapi arape. And he points out later on, if that's the case as far as he is concerned, the halach is that when a person, basically speaking, is involved in medical care, if you did what you had to do, but you might not have cured the patient, you might have died, but if you do what you have to do, your pata mutter, there's no culpability whatsoever. He sides with that concept of doing all your kaiches, that when the Torah says mekanshin and rush l'rapais, it means total exemption. B'dei shemayim, b'dei adam, if you did all you possibly could do. And once again, lo misrasho, lo yin yafeh, you basically didn't violate that. There's no reason on the face of this earth you should be chayiv for anything. And that's the psak of the Divrei Shaul, of Shalom Eshev, in this specific sugya. And such is the psak also of the Aruch HaShulchan in this specific sugya. I'll show you where in your major Mar Mekamas the Aruch HaShulchan says this explicitly, so you can see it yourself. He says it, Rabbi Yisai. Place. He says over here, in Halacha Beis, about 6 lines before Halacha Gimel, on page number 17, which you have a copy of the Aruch HaShulchan. So he says over here, this 3 lines from the top, on the left-hand side, right over here, Rabbi, so my finger's pointing, right over here in the Aruch HaShulchan over here. So he says, I want you to know, he says, mes al yedei refu'as v'nodo lo sheshaga gareza goyla al yado kishiyesh lo mokem litlo shu garam al yedei hisrashlut olo iyon yafeh. Alva below that, nearly dein nechayev galus, the migara me'av hamakas benov rav harodas tamido, the pat the migalus, because at that time, since you oisik b'mitzvah l'shleimus, the betur should be. So therefore, what I pointed out before is an explicit Aruch HaShulchan as well, that under normal conditions you shouldn't be chai, period, etc., etc. Now, there is, however, one phenomenon that I want to mention over here that applies to most cases of refuos. In most cases of refuos, there's no guarantee to cure, But the choice is, if I do the medical care, and there's the sakonis nefashos, it might cure the patient. The ultimate result is, it might not cure the patient. God forbid, sometimes the patient might die, but that's not a normal type of circumstance. It's a possibility. So therefore, Rabbi allows me under normal circumstances to involve myself in medical care that could cure. So for Beduka, it might not cure. Sometimes there's a negative consequence of death. In our sugya, which we're going to be dealing with today, it's a much more mitzumsimdik type of result. We're dealing with a person that's about to die, without a question, no shayla, maybe in a couple of days. We'll see very shortly, we question about a couple of months when it comes to that question as well. And the question now is, there's only one last medical care available based upon the doctors to cure this person. And the phenomenon we have over here is that whether you're dealing with a medicinal care or you're dealing with a surgical care, this procedure, which is a refuah beduka, has proven two things. Either it's going to cure you miraculously because of its power, or if God forbid it doesn't cure you, it will kill you within a couple of hours, or maybe instantaneously if you have a real negative reaction, which means there's no possibility of surviving this without a cure. So either it's going to cure you, or it's going to kill you, which is much different than the circumstances of refuahs I just mentioned 5 minutes ago. So the question you got to ask yourself is, did the makaras that I told you about, that I taught you, and the Rabbi, does that concept of concern of toss, mistake, and death, does that cover this type of medical care? Or maybe no. Maybe it only covers medical care where there's a chance of refuah, a chance of lack of refuah, slim chance of death. But where you have a choice between vadai cure or vadai death, who says that's a davar pashut from the makaras I taught you, that's a given, I'm allowed to partake of that type of activity. And in fact, once again, the gadol I found that mamish was mechaven to my problem over here was the Tzitz Eliezer, Kedaka B'Kedesh. Let me show you to where he asked the question. If you look on page number 10 of the Mar Makamos, where he says in 10b, Hatzad Hashavav, or the Makaris refu up until now, Mechol Anal Shakor Ofe Mechavan L'Shem Ripui, Apidachi HaRefu Shabiyadai, Mutter Umitzvah Biyadol Larapais Asachayil, Api Shitas HaRefu Amukubalos, Toripu Machlazos, Vein Lo Lachshav Pen Yita Pen Rav Eshbaripu Mishum Ahavta Recha Kamelcha Umishum Pekuach Nefesh. He then says, if that's the case, so let's look at number D. Lefi kol hanal efshe kvar lechar lefshat mizeh lahat gam larapas berfu kazos motelas al kaf maznayim o she yisrap yechoyl v'im lo chalila tkar misaso v'chevish gam kol harafu same sakan lechoyl kedivran b'chol zos itir larapos. Maybe amakaros work. And then look at the next paragraph. Al be'emes he says chila gadol yesh bizeh. The bechal harafu as avo b'shem shem yiter harofei v'yikara misaso al v'harofei b'rfuos as the cholas harafu elu betuach no lefi klolei hachachma shebiyado shirapis achol b'zeh v'lim lo yisava ezer tatzpoches beguf achola rak im yiter b'chachmaso thomas harafu es achola al v'mashe ein kein but refu kazo shegam chachmas harafu be'atzma idola shegam sama mavis. V'yisakin shetomis es achola v'aroif nichnas b'rosh im chachmas harafu b'yado l'dei sofik zeh shem lo terapeu takar refu azos misaso shachola. Who says this refuah we're talking about is covered by the Makairais we've had up until this point in time? So he says, l'cheinitin hadav l'hemol shel bara hadav k'ashchal musuk v'ayim l'mos ken ozi asal l'rofi l'kanes l'peis ha'safik v'arpos harafu kazos or l'ituch zeh. So he says, without enough further makar, I cannot say just carte blanche, I can take upon myself this type of achrayut. It's for this reason I want to teach you today that the only way we know you can do the type of refuahs we're discussing today is the gilui of the Gemara in Masechtas Avodah Zarah, Chav Zayin. That Gemara, which if you go back now, Rabbi site to the text of the Gemara, going back now to page number 2 of today's Mareh Mekomos. When you go back to page 2, and we have the Gemara telling us vis-a-vis Safek Mei Safek Chai, that you can use an Ovid of Avodah Zarah, a doctor who's not publicly known, who's not publicly watched, who's Choshed or Ritzichas Yehudim. We can use them to merapa us for the fee he might kill you. But that's if Safek Chai Safek Mes. In Vadai Mes, the Gemara says I can use this type of doctor expert who's a guy, even though we know he's an anti-Semite, but perhaps he might, because of his reputation and ego, heal you. But the problem is he might hate you so much he might kill you. So the Gemara says even Vadei Meis, you're still willing to live a little time frame before you die naturally. What about your Chayashah? To which the Gemara answers, L'Chayashah L'Chashinin, you're not worried about it. So the Gemara says, Al Pi Svara, you're allowed to risk Chayashah v'Cha'ilam, but what's interesting, the Gemara doesn't say it's just a Svara. The Gemara then asks a question which I didn't deal with last week when I read the Gemara. The Gemara says, how do you know this? Minot Taimra, v'L'Chayashah L'Chashinin. Such a Chiddush cannot be based upon a Svara, and it has to be based upon a Gzeir Sakos. It has to be based upon some proof from some type of Torah source that you can risk Chayashah v'Cha'ilam. The Mekaris I quoted up until now don't cover this, as the Tzisei Elazar basically warned. So where do we have a biblical source, a hashkafas that Torah mentioned, Chayashah can be risked v'Cha'ilam, and Chazal accepted this as a principle? So the Gemara brings in a very strange case. I'm going to read the case for you inside, but I want you to tell me, Chevra, why I say it's a very strange case. Okay? Let me read the Gemara, but I want you to tell me why you feel it's very strange. How do we know that Chayashah can basically be violated for Chaya Eilam? So the Gemara quotes the following psukim from Tanakh, from Malachim Beis, of a historical case that took place. Imarmanu novo ir v'arav be'ir v'masnu sham. Now the case was there were 4 Mitzorayim that were outside one of the cities in Eretz Israel. Since the cities in Eretz Israel on this Kadesh B'Kedushas Eretz Israel, there's an Isa for Mitzorah to go inside, so they were sitting at the gate. But everybody was starving in the city, they were starving outside the city, and there was a non-Jewish army, the Aram army, encamped outside, wanting to besiege the city. So the fact of the matter is these Mitzorayim, amongst them this was called Gersi Ubanov, the famous Gersi Ubanov. Some say Gersi, some Mepharshim say he was a big Talmid Chacham, but he did something wrong when it came to his behavior with Elisha, and that's why he had Tzeras. But they say he was a Chacham, and he tried to follow the Mishpatei HaTorah, and that's why if the Gemara learns something from them, it's based upon the Chachmas Torah that they demonstrated the Chazal bring a mashal from. So they made the following calculation. If we stay outside the city, even go into the city, we're going to die vadai from a famine. There's no way of surviving. No food, nothing. If we go and throw ourselves at mercy at the Aram soldiers in their camp, they might have compassion upon us. Nebuchadnezzar, it's a bracha in a human being, and they might feed us and take care of us. But on the other hand, since they see we're Jews, they might act as good old Mideast people do. I don't care what's happening with the Jew, just kill us on the spot. So you have Vadai Meis. You have over here a Safek. They might have compassion, feed us, bring us back to health, give us the ability to survive. But if they wouldn't do anything, they still had guaranteed Chayashah until they basically starved to death. However that long that is. If they go into the camp of Aram, they can kill them on the spot, so whatever Chayashah they had would be wiped out. They might have Rachmanis and feed them and give them what they need and allow them to survive and entitle them to Chaya Olam. So the Gemara says the choice of Gersi Ubanov to throw their mercy at the Aram camp and At the end, a miracle had taken place because the night before HaKadosh Baruch Hu had sent Kailas, giving them the impression that the whole Mideast was gathering together to help the Jews to fight this conquering army. And therefore, all the soldiers of this massive army scattered. When they came into the camp, they found the whole camp abandoned, full of food, and nobody's using it. So not only did they satiate themselves, they went back into the city and told the city, while you're starving over here, you have a camp full. So now it ended up saving them and saving the town as well, the encompassed city. But what's interesting is Chazal focus upon this as a raya, that when you have a choice of Chayei Shah and a Chayei Olam, and you're putting yourself in Sakana Tzuma to sacrifice one for the hope of the other, what they did is a paradigm of halachic permissibility. That's why the Tanakh records it, to give it acquiescence, to give it halachic propriety. And Chazal learned from there into our case of refuah, what they did over there can be applied over here. That's what the Gemara says. What do you got to say? Let me hear. We're going to get to that. We're going to get to that. But even to risk your life for something, or basically put your potential life in danger, that's more a permissibility question than a halachic obligation. Now, Bichlal, Nishmat Secha means you shouldn't put yourself in any danger walking over a wobbly bridge. Nobody's going to say you have an obligation to do such. Don't put yourself in that endangerment. Don't walk by a kosel hanatui that might crash upon you. So the question over here is, we're going to work now with the assumption, which we've actually paskin, it's a permissibility, not a halachic obligation. I'll give you the makaris for that. So the question is, do you feel comfortable with the dimya? Yes?
I think there's a chiluk to be made between, throwing yourself in the mercy of men versus a surgery or a procedure that might be more b'dei shamayim. Some distinction to be made between the two.
Okay, I like what you're saying, but if that's what you're saying, then I want to extend it to one more part of the sugya. Yes?
They had no choice in that scenario. They were going to die of starvation. They had no choice.
So basically, I'm going to die in 5 days. Let me go in front of a firing squad. Let's get over it. Let's get off with it. Can you do that?
No, they were ready to surrender.
Well, the fact of the matter, but it's this: you're putting yourself in front of a firing squad, and they're going to shoot you. Imagine going to ISIS. We're surrendering. Good. Light the fire, guys. We're going to have a barbecue. I mean, that's you're dealing with crazy people out there in the Mideast. So recently, when ISIS soldiers ran out of these towns that they were chasing them out of Iraq because they were overpowered by the forces, so instead of ISIS having compassion, the troops were under danger. Someone killed Gedaimer because they left their positions in the town and didn't die in location. They took all the people who ran away from the ISIS army, put them in a public square, and had a public barbecue to show other soldiers they will not tolerate anybody basically leaving their position. I mean, this is the mentality of the people in that location, Rabbi Say. So you have every reason to believe they go into Aram and I'm a Jew, welcome, and you're dead. So the fact is something else that bothered me. You started it. What else should be bothering you? What was the Gemara's case? A person's deathly ill. He's definitely going to die. And I got a surgeon over here, or a major internist, a guy, who's known to be a tremendous anti-Semite. Chashid al-Ritzicha. And I'm saying to myself, well, this disease is definitely going to kill me. But maybe if I throw myself at the mercy of that surgeon, he's going to come along and uproot momentarily the sin and hatred he has in his heart for Jews. That's makalkelis is ashura. And heal me and cure me for whatever reason he's doing that. So that is sacrificing Chayei Shah for Chayei Olam, basing it on what? The maybe Ratzon HaTov of an anti-Semitic guy. Now that fits in well with the mashal of throwing yourself at the mercy of Aram, if you think about it for a certain level. But the fact of the matter is that analogous to the cases we're dealing with the shaylas we're dealing with? Let me hear why. Okay. What? What do you mean it's his job? We talked about you talked about the Gemara's case or Bisman Hazeh?
No, I'm talking about the case of being mitzvah from the.
So you're saying is that in the case of the Mitzorayim,
It's much more likelihood that in our case, not the Mitzorayim case, much more likelihood that in the case of the doctor, that he will do a good job in healing you, either because of money, because it's his profession.
ego, money.
Whatever it may be.
You know, what you're saying is, I hear beautifully, that there are motivations on the part of that Goyish anti-Semitic surgeon to heal you. Either he likes Jewish money, and you're going to pay him a lot of money. Everybody likes Jewish money. Or the fact is, this might be one of the most difficult cases, and he's going to get such a reputation that everybody's going to run from all over to go to him. So it will also give him money. It will give him more customers. So he's putting down his sinner for the sake of, whatever it might be. So he has a nagia to want to heal you. That's what you're basically saying. Excellent. Okay, yes?
In the case of the surgery that we're doing in modern day, it's even if the Sephardic isn't like the science, you don't know what will happen. You can't ask the doctor what's going to happen. In the case of the Assyrians, if you would have asked the Assyrians, what are you going to do with them, they could have told you, well, either kill them or keep them alive. The Sephardic wasn't in like the Mitzvah, the Sephardic was in, we just didn't know what the person was going to do. As opposed to, in the case of the surgery, no one knows what the outcome will be in this specific case.
Okay. You're saying something, very good. But I just want to say a little, I'm taking what he said and saying even sharper. No, but I'm gonna make it very sharp now, what you just said. In what we're dealing with in the Gemara, the suffix of outcome depends upon a purposeful machshava of the guy responding to our dire need, which is a very subjective phenomenon. I can control somebody, I can't control somebody, but it's very subjective. How is a human being going to react to this? Maybe I can control it by bribing, maybe I can't, but it's very subjective. In the shaylis that I already showed you starting last week to read the tshuva of the gadol that we're going to be analyzing very shortly, the fact of the matter is, science already analyzed the medical care we're giving to these specific people. In this specific case, with this level of illness, with this type of sickness, the guy is gone. As far as the sickness is, he's dead if we don't do anything. The medicine we have, which is not a human being, which is a medicine, either the medicine will cure him and kill him. The doubt is not in human emotion or human response. The doubt is how an inanimate object like medicine is going to impact on the body chemistry of this person. That's a much more manageable suffix, if you hear what I'm saying to you, than relying upon the Ratzon Tov of anti-Semites who are out to kill Jews. If you think about it for a couple of minutes, there the emotional, do I hate them more than the Jewish money? It's very difficult in that case to navigate what the Goyish surgeon is going to do or the Aram Ami is going to do because of blatant anti-Semitism and what goes into a person's decision. It's very subjective. Using medicine to cure or not to cure and based upon body chemistry in many respects is very objective because either your body's going to react positively or negatively. There's nothing you can do to make the medicine act more positively or act more negatively. So in many respects, the case that we're dealing with, the Chayshah Chay Olam, I look upon it as a much more healthy example of Chayshah Chay Olam than the cases of relying upon a Jewish mindset of hatred or mercy when it comes to determining your reaction and your willingness to think about it, to jeopardize my momentary life based upon the whimsical attitude of a guy anti-Semite is not such a controlled experiment. Jeopardizing my momentary life for world-famous medicine that's very powerful, that can either kill or cure, and there's very good likelihood that it will cure you, otherwise it's not going to make a difference anyway, it's a little more of a secure type of activity. because you're not depending upon factors that can change on a moment's notice because of a person's whimsical feeling.
That's assuming you're talking about something like just administering a medication. Performing a surgery, you're in the hands of the surgeon himself.
Yeah.
He can do whatever he wants.
But the fact of the matter is, the surgeons being described in these tshuvas were not the surgeons being described in the Gemara. By the time these tshuvas were written, historically in the 17, 18, 1900s, and 20, you already had governmental control over there.
Okay, so I'm saying now you have.
Yeah. So I'm saying, if that's the case, the tshuvas we're not talking about.
That's what I was going to ask you a question to whether or not this entire sugya even applies today anyway, because I know Shulchan Aruch gives you, talks about being mitzvah from a goy, but whether or not we even have a problem with this at all because we have government regulation and licensing.
So my answer to you is, that's it. I purposely did this to bring this out for you to feel the mituach over here. The fact of the matter is, the concerns of the Gemara, if the only concern of the Gemara was the attitude of the surgeon, which means in the Gemara's case, we know for a fact he definitely can cure you with his medical skill, with this possible machla. He has the expertise and he's going to do it. But the question is, will he use that skill to accomplish that? Or will he, like anti-Semitism, override that and kill you instead? But in the Gemara's case, he definitely has the refuah that can cure you. The question is whether he'll do that or not. And that's why anti-Semitism plays its fact. Today, in our modern world, with all the governmental supervision and the various committees that exist to oversee what happens in medical care in hospitals today, the fact of the matter is, I don't care how big the guy anti-Semite is, he's not going to lose his worldwide credentials because of his hatred of Jews. So therefore, the Gemara's case will not be a sheila in today's milieu of Chai Shel versus Chai Olam based upon the case of the Gemara. So, I'm answering you in the affirmative. You're 100% correct. The only mitzvahs we have today that Chai Shel Chai Olam therefore comes in is not the human factor over here, but it is the medical factor, whether the actual refuah is therefore allowed to be undertaken with either vadei chaim or vadei mes, which is not the way refuah is normally the statistical phenomenon, because it could have been chai, it could have marapiyu, not marapiyu, and maybe die. Whether we can go to the extent of either vadei cure or vadei death, that's the question we have. And what's interesting, it's almost like a kal v'chemer, I have to say. The Gemara derives it from a case in the Gemara that's very weak, because you're relying upon human ratzain to be willing to cure you and not to kill you. So in that case, it's a kal v'chemer. If I, based upon a subjective case, can allow Chayshot to be jeopardized for Chai Olam, with is every reason to believe this guy is going to act in kind and kill me even though he has the refuah. Today we don't have that Nisayan anymore, but now the question is the medicine, which is a refuah b'duka, am I allowed to undertake that sakana as a Jewish doctor, a Jewish patient, realizing the two extremes over here? So it's a kal v'chomer. If I can do it in the Gemara's case, with a likelihood of death over success, based upon the human experience of anti-Semitism, should bet that we shouldn't go to that Goyish doctor. But nevertheless, over here in our medical system, we don't have that problem because of medical overseeing. We're dealing now with an objective medicine that has no hatred towards you whatsoever. There, I say, we surely should be able to therefore put ourselves in suffix of the concept of Chai Olam versus Chai Olam, because the criteria of it are more quality controlled and less dependent upon the will and whim of a guy. I think the Gemara is doing this as a kal v'chomer, even though they don't mention a kal v'chomer. If you hear what I'm saying to you, what do you have to say? I love devil's advocates. Go ahead. Yeah. The fact of the matter is, there are some people like that, and probably some of the real radical Muslims today probably would subscribe to that. But by and large, most human beings in the medical field do not, and that's why the Gemara right above talks about when you ask these Goyish anti-Semitic doctors questions about medical care, but you're not going to use it, go under their care, but ask them for their advice. Even these anti-Semites, if they're fearful they'll be caught with saying a sheker, they weren't Thomas Nafshim Aplishtim. So we're talking about a guy in this context that is concerned for public opinion and doesn't want his reputation, but if he can get away killing you without any negative consequences, that's what we're dealing with. If we were dealing with Goyim, that mamish Thomas Nafshim Aplishtim, there's nothing to talk about. Forget about this. It's a lost cause. But since the Gemara quality control, that's the type of doctor we're dealing with, therefore I don't have to bring that type of radical phenomenon. But the fact of the matter, at the end of the day, I personally believe, after having thought about this a long, long time, for many years, that the sugya over here is surely not exact what we're dealing with today. Our situation is much better because we're dealing with now with objective medical care and people who are participating in the system that are much more quality controlled. And the fact is that this is now an objective reality. Since the medical has been proven to be refu beduka, can I undertake this type of chance? And the Gemara says, if I can take the chance by human sveikais, which are unpredictable and don't have a qualitative answer, over here where there's basically is a qualitative answer and it's not subjective but objective reality, then surely I should be able to take the chance. I think that's the way we learn the sugya. Yes?
Just a question regarding that comment that I wanted to make. Can we make a distinction between the subjective case with human being that there's factors to mitigate his anti-Semitism and bribing him or his ego, whereas with the science there isn't that, so maybe we shouldn't be making this comment.
I hear. I think somebody mentioned that before. Who mentioned that before about bribing him? I think we already talked that out a little bit. And that is a possibility. And the fact of the matter is that would be the tzad keneged. But at the end of the day, I just want you to see that on all four, the cases are not 100% exact. I want you to see that because that always bothered me, and some people just take it for granted. It's not for granted. Yes?
Just in response to what Ike was saying about the Tamot Nafshim Aplishtim.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem like it's accepted in Halakha.
Yeah.
Even the Rambam over here.
Yeah. They don't want to lose their money, Yeah, kesef yanes hakoyel. Yeah, and that's without governmental supervision. That's just money talking. So that brings a little more chizuk to what you wanted to say. Now, go back to page number 4 now. I want to go back now to the Shus Yaakov's tshuva, and with it demonstrate with you certain parts of this, and the other tshuvas I have today in Achiezer, that's crucial halach lamas, and Ramosha's tshuva, and the Binyan Tzion. So we have a lot to cover in the next couple of minutes, but I want to show you how at the end we'll have a definitive maskana, what the ultimate consensus of the post-Gemara. Now if you go back to the tshuva, the Shus Yaakov, which is the tshuva that everybody quotes the Shus Yaakov as the paradigm to answer this question. In the formulation, there's no question, as he said, ach she'im sheyesh refuah ach she'ef she'israb bechalav gam ef shel hepech shem yikach refuah zu imeni tatzlich chas v'shalom yomas miyad teichshar shtayim imut lasas refuah zu ach hashem l'chayisha v'shavel tasa adiv. So we start with this whole D and how important chayishar is, and we read through that. I'm not going to read that again. I want to go back to his ultimate teretz. His ultimate teretz is found after B in the text, and that is, ultimately speaking, if that's the case, he therefore says that when it comes to the purposes of medical treatment, he says, Hacha im tochesh lo yisrapim im vada yomus, v'kan shavkin avad al mever asafik, v'kakase b'seres teres adam. It shouldn't be the Rambam, it should be the Ramban with a nun. That's and therefore the chayisha lo chashinin, l'sfek the chayisha, mekami efsh the chay tuva lo chashinin, kol zeh haskas. He says, kol zeh haskamas haposkim. As far as we're concerned, this is the psak of the Gemara with the poskim except. He brings the Rambam also bringing this. Simin Kufnan Hey is he quoted in Shulchan Aruch here a day with his brought down. Kevin Shavad Bayomas Manichin Havad of Taisin as a Safek, Ula Yisrapa, Umekomokam. Now we come to criteria. Even though I allow you to undertake this, B'Teiras allowance, Ein Lasos Harofi Kepeshuto, Kirak Tzarech Lios Mosimbo B'Davel Fakolach Imrufim Muchim Ba'ir. You have to ask other opinions. The doctor has to check with other doctors. Al Piroi Vadeis Dahaino Ruba Dominka Shu Kafel, which means not 51% majority, over 70% majority have to agree with you. This is the only way to go. Therefore, you need a majority of Rofim and also Askamas Achachim Shabir in order to implement this. So his psak is, it's allowed, but you have to have consultation and approval of other doctors vis-a-vis the ultimate capacity for this to cure you. So the number of doctors you're consulting is what he's adding into the picture. You have to have a consultant with a Rav, a Paisek, the Paskin. I'm giving you a heter to do such, to give a little quality control over here, but you're allowed to jeopardize Chayesha for Chayolam that he Paskins, and the proof text is the Gemara and Avodah Zarah. That's adding a Makar that the other Makaris would not have given us, and that's what I want to add today. Now, the big problem in all of this is, how do you define Chayesha v'Chayola, which is the question we discussed last week. Now, the source everybody quotes, Rabbi Isai, I purposely printed for you, is the Darch Tshuva in Kufn and Hey, number C on the bottom of the page. I want you to see the Lashon inside, because this is the way we paskin, and this is the Lashon we should be careful with. Manikra Chayesha, Manikra Chayola, Ayin b'Darch Tshuva, shemaybe b'Shem, Agona Shlomo Kluger. And what does he say? She'amed al-Mecha b'zeh, Kilon is parish Kamahu Hashir Shal Chayesha, the ein loma dem sofa lamus toch shana shatayim nami hay nechshav chayesha dem kein eich meshkachas lechayolam haray sof adam lamus so mali shana achas mali shtayim or meya shana sof olam yichya im kein ye nechshav akol chayesha. That can be v'doich loim de davke im yamos ma'isa chayli nechshav chayesha al yamos bechali acher lo nechshav chayesha zeh no the mali mechal zeh or lechali acher. Because of, so what's the answer? So this is, so the Darchei Tshuva is quoting Rav Shlomo Kluger to define the ultimate parameters. The had the kaimen treifa in a chayud beis chodesh, an animal that's called a treifa by Chazal, normally treifas and a chayis is not going to survive 12 months. Muchach, the chol sheni yochel lichios machmas acholi zeh yud beis chodesh, v'sof olamus mecholi zeh betoch yud beis chodesh, lo nechshav chayra chayesha, Alvim Amid Lamus Rach La'ach Yud Beis Chodesh Lo Nechs Chayesha Rach Chaya Olam. Very important. According, therefore, to the way that the Darchei Tshuva paskins, and everybody accepts this criteria, a person who's going to live only 6 months and definitely die, that's Chayesha. If I'm able to generate another year's life as a result of doing this procedure, I'm giving them Chaya Olam, because anything more than 12 months is a Chaya Olam. So you now have some criteria to work with. A person's going to live 9 months and definitely die, that's also Chayesha. If I give the person a year or more to live, that's Chaya Olam. So I have to have those criteria in the terminology and the phraseology over here. If I'm going to give a person who's going to live 6 months, he's going to live now 3 months more, I can't undertake this procedure. It's too dangerous, and there's no justification according to the poskim over here. Yes, sir.
That means that if they were going to live 11 months without medicine, it was 50 years with medicine, then you tell them take 11 months and then die.
No, I didn't say that. When did I say that? When did I say that?
No, 11 months is Chayesha, so you could risk that.
Even another month. 13 months. Yeah, 13 months. If it was 13 months, only 2 more months.
You have to generate another year of life for them. That's what he's saying. Not generate 2 more months of life. But if a person already is going to live 12 months or live more than 12 months, he's not a Chayesha situation yet. In other words, the question is defining the level of endangerment that he can basically jeopardize himself. So Chazal said, the Gemara says, L'chayesha lo chashinin, and never said, L'chaye olam ein chashina. You have to have some parameters. What?
That Albert's point though, so then like, once you're going to
If you're going to do?
You're gonna be ma'arim, like, okay, so then if it's 13 months and you know he's gonna live a year, let's say, so you can't risk it. So 1 month later, just give it to him a month later. Now you're giving him, no.
Or what you're saying is that if he's going to live 14 months,
If he's gonna live 14 months, so you're saying at that moment we know he's gonna live 14 months. I can't risk it.
right?
So wait 4 months, and then at that juncture he only has 10 more months left. I can risk it.
Could very well be.
So if at the end of the day I'm gonna be able to risk it anyway, why can't I risk it from now? It's like this-
Because once again, because there's a
that 4 months is critical.
yeah. The crucial factor is in 4 months a lot of things can happen, and the chazai will only matter chayish of the items. There has to be some type of objective criteria, or else the whole system falls by the wayside. Yes. What? Why?
Cancer itself doesn't kill per se. It's not a virus. It hits an organ, and the organ has failure, and then the organ causes that person to die, or kidney failure, or whatever, the chemo. So, according to his definition, it has to be both. It has to have two factors. It has to be the otokoli, and it also has to be chayasha in order to be able to do something. But the cancer itself is not.
He didn't say that. He didn't say that.
He gave both.
He didn't say, no, you're interpreting it that way. There's no question that when it comes to cancer, cancer kills because it destroys your organs and makes them go into failure. It's not the cancer killing you as a cancer. It makes your body dysfunctional when it comes to a functional entity. So organ failure because of cancer is organ failure killed you because of the cancer causing that organ failure. It's still one thing. It's one machla. It's not two machlas. Yes?
The concept of like violating one Shabbat that you could live.
We don't paskin that when it comes to normal refuos.
So again, this is,
Yeah.
so if he was going to live a month, and now you could extend it by only 1 more month, I'm doing it.
No. That's exactly the parameters I'm trying to show you now. And everybody accepts this dachi tshuva as Torah min hashamayim. It's interesting. Nobody violates this. I've looked around, and guys, I haven't found it for years anybody saying differently. But this dachi tshuva is looked upon as the source, and that's why he says, what are the parameters? I mean, the dachi tshuva who was a goyin olam, mamash a goyin olam, the munkacha. I mean, when it came to especially his parish on Yardeya, he says, I still haven't figured it out, and the only gadol I found, which means he looked hard, high and low, the only gadol I found that gave it a parameter of halachic definition is Rav Shlomo Kluger. Now, if there were other gedolim around who gave a parameter, he would have mentioned them. So you're now relying upon Rav Shlomo Kluger, quoted by the Darchei Tshuva, giving him his two das akashris. Moshe and everybody else basically accepts that as Torah Misinai, and that's what they work with. Therefore, it's difficult for me or anybody, Anu Hakatanim, to try to second guess them. We got to work within the criteria over here. Now, but what I want to show you now is something quite interesting. Turn now to page number 5. When Rav Chaim Oizer Grzinski, who was the Gadol Hador of his generation, that means basically the end of 18, beginning of 1900s, right over there. He was like the Rav Moshe Feinstein of his time. So he basically, in quotation A and B, deals with this question. And he says the following. When it comes to chayla v'roifa mimchem oimim ki below apparatzion nituach lo yichi yosem mishisha chadashim. So over here you see his chayisha is 6 months, not a day or two. Okay. Ev sheyecha natu mesukim od the karv yosha shomas meheira lacharaniram from the Gemara Vadizara. He quotes the Gemara, and he quotes therefore, if that's the case, listen to what he says. Chayisha lachashinin. V'heicha de'efsha sheyisrape af ba'ofen rachok kol shenesyashim rufuaso. If the likelihood of success is very, very unlikely, a minute percentage of success, a majority percentage of failure, but when there's no other way to cure this person, we're now talking about potential success in the operative procedure. So he's being mechadish over here, that even a suffix rachok miot, it's a 10% chance he will succeed. 90% chance he will fail. We can still have the permission to do such. Now, what I want to mention to you over here, Rabbi Yisai, before you look something up and get yourself confused, there is a tshuva of the Radvaz, of David ben Zimra, which is also quoted by the Poskim. When Chazal mandated medical care b'taris chiyuv, there it has to be at least 51% more chance of success. So the 51% or more of success in medical care, it becomes a chiyuv, afilu bal karcha. All the halachos we learned about the chiyuv to administer the medicine and the chiyuv for the patient to undergo the medical care, and you can force the patient to accept it according to Loisamad Adam Riacha and the psak of Rav Yaakov Enu Kedaimer. That's the Radah says when it's 51% more, therefore you have to always do it and you have no choice to play games. When, however, it's 50-50, there it's an option. When it's normally less than 50%, usually it's usher as if literally committing suicide. That's the normal psak, if you hear what I'm saying to you. In our sugya over here, we have an incredible yotzim and a klal. Because what you have over here is a psak, even if it's less than 50%, even if it's only 10%. Where normally we say it's suicide, over here because of the chance of definite success, and you have no choice, Chazal gave you a leniency to do something that under normal conditions, in normal medical care, they wouldn't allow you to do. Which means, I'll say it a little differently to say it sharper. In a normal case of medical care where either medicine will cure you, or it won't cure you, very unlikely, but it could kill you as well, but that's the minority result in most medical care. It could either cure you or not cure you, and there's every reason to believe based upon the medical science, it will cure you based upon percentages. You're mechuyev to undergo that. If there's 50-50%, it becomes an option. Once it hits lower than 50% and it goes lower and lower, under normal medical conditions, where you're not definitely going to die over here, you can't attempt to do that. It's like suicide. But we're in a situation over here where you're definitely going to die without a question over here, which you don't have by normal medical conditions. And now the question is, there's one last medical procedure that either can cure you and give you chai olam, and it might kill you. So the question is, what should be the percentage success to allow you to do that? So I'm going to show you, it's a machlokas poskim. The shita of the Achiezer is that even if the chance of success is less than 50%, even safek rachak miod, the psak is over here, I'm allowed to take the chance. There is a shita of a gadol whose sefer was Mishnas Chachamim. I want you to write his name down. The Mishnas Chachamim, who you're going to see quoted very shortly, his name was Rav Yosef Hachgelanter. He was one of the Achronim who lived in Kufa before the Achiezer and such. Rav Yosef Hachgelanter, Mishnas Chachamim. He was of the opinion only if there's a 50-50 chance can I do Safek Chayeshav Chayolam. That was his opinion. It's his opinion that's now being rejected by, you'll see very shortly, by all the other poskim. The Achiezer, you see already, says he rejects it. I'll show you Rav Moshe rejects it 4 times in his tshuva. So I'm going to show you that this has become the shita that you basically reject over here, which basically opens up the parameters how daring you can be in this specific case. So let me just continue reading certain other parts of this. I want to finish today, Rabbi, so look very carefully. Who? He says you have to have 50-50 chance. He would not allow you to do it. Okay? Everybody else says even less than 50%, and not only 40%, not only 30%, 10%, they would allow you to take the chance. 1%? Whatever. I mean, once you're starting with that, I mean...
What's the svara of the Rabbaz, the Mechalek, where he's usually, like we saw earlier, where he called him a Hasid Shoteh, if you're going to put yourself in a Shoteh.
So the fact of the matter is there are various sugyas mechulakos between Bavli and Yerushalmi about how far you could be misaking yourself when it comes to Hatzalah purposes. So he, in order to show there shouldn't be a stira between necessarily Bavli and Yerushalmi, where the Bavli seems to say when it comes to Hatzalas Nefashos, basically speaking, you're chai b'tor, but both the patient and the rescuer, the matzel nitzel, have to do it whether they like it or not. So he says that's when it's over 50%, when it's 51% more. The Yerushalmi text seems to say that you have no chiyuv to be matzel somebody in the state of sakana, both with Teres Matzah Nitzel. He interprets that, basically speaking, that is either 50% or less than 50%. So there shouldn't be a machlokes between Bavli and Yerushalmi when it comes to Hatzalas Nefashos. So he's basically trying to machriv. Yeah. It's also Hatzalas Nefashos. The question is, statistically, when and where and how can you basically... So over here, that's why I pointed out to you, once you hit 50 and less, nobody will say you have a chiyuv to practice medicine b'teres. So the Radvaz says if it's 50% under normal circumstances, it will be a reshus. Less than 50% under normal medical conditions is harei mischai b'nafshecha, is a chesed shoter. That's what I'm saying, but he wasn't dealing with the Gemara over here. That's why I purposely prefaced today that the normal criteria of the Radvaz doesn't work over here. You have a special Gezeres HaKasav because of the desperate nature of this situation, and that's in fact is marumiz in he says, Afil ba'ofen rachak shekol shenesyashu merufuaso. He's adding that in. The impossibility of the situation to stop the definite death is allowing us to do something that in all the medical care I normally wouldn't allow you to do. So everybody's falling into place over here to explain this is like the Yotzim in Aklal. Yes, sir.
So we discussed the definition of Chayei Olam being longer than a year. What about Chayei Shad? Just like what's the lower boundary? Less than a year till if the person is...
Well, a day or two. We saw in the tshuva, a day or two.
Even a day or two.
Yeah. That's Chayei Shad. We saw that, that's tshuva, that's the way.
So then he needs an operation right now, otherwise he's dead.
He needs an operation that instead of having 2 more days to survive,
Right now,
I'm saying, you have an operation now that is so powerful, and this person who's definitely going to die within 2 days, that either the operation is going to cure him or kill him on the operating table. So instead of having 48 hours left in his life, he has maybe 1 hour or 2.
now I'm saying, let's say he only has that 1 hour or 2. He needs operation stat, otherwise he's dead on the spot. I mean, you're not bringing that closer.
It doesn't make a difference. There has to be a potential Chayei Olam over here, and there has to be the fact of the matter. There has to be, we're not talking about, like he asked the question, is it 1%? Once you come to this calculation, if you had 10 hours to live, and this is going to give you only 1 hour to live, you have the same problem. It's like Chayei Shah is Chayei Shah. So I mean, that's what I'm saying to you. It's
Well, if the person is dying on the spot, don't you have an obligation to do anything?
you have an operation. Yeah. So you have an operation to do things that normally generate chiyus. You have no right to do anything that could definitely kill a person on the spot. You hear what I'm saying to you? In that case, shav al tasa adif. That's the crucial factor. When Hatzalah,
Then it would be forbidden to enact even if a person has a DNR, would be assumed to enact the DNR.
No. When I get to real end of life issues, I'll define the parameters on that. But over here, what I'm mentioning to you very carefully, listen to me very carefully. When you have Hatzalah members, or even a hospital calling a code on a person that went into cardiac arrest, so the fact of the matter is they do procedures that are procedures that have been proven to perhaps bring a person back to life, but they're not going to kill the patient by doing those procedures. You know what I'm saying to you? Over here, you're doing a medical procedure, might save him, but there is a very strong possibility that if they weren't dead up until now, this is going to be the Makkah B'Patish. That's not what normal Hatzalah members or normal calls of codes in the hospital, basically speaking, are involved with doing. That's what I'm saying. You have to be careful. That's what I'm saying. You have to be mechalik to different types of medical treatment. Now, the only thing I want to show you over here is basically speaking, he ends up, Chayei Shah, and he therefore paskins to affirm the psak of the Shvus Yaakov. That's what he does. Turn to page number 6. When it comes to Rav Moses Tshuva, same exact case, same exact shayla over here. I don't want to repeat things I don't have to repeat, but what I want to show you over here is the following. When it comes to Ramosha, if you look where B is in the text over here, see where the B is? See where my finger is, guys? 2 lines above the B. So Ramosha says on this question, he says, Mashum, he says, Lili Farma Kais, he says, Safachai, Safakmes, Emesrapimhem, Bashum Da'akam Chashmisahu, Yosim Safak Ashachal Harbe, Umakamakam Vadaimes, v'nogei l'chayesha l'chashina mutlas rapos af shukaru levadai sheyakaltenu misham sofek hakoton shem yirapenu. This is even more explicit than that of the Achiezer. I mean, he's really bringing it down to the bare minimal. And Ramosha, interesting, he mentions this three other times in the Tshuva. At the end of paragraph B, he says, Yosakar Melchamta Shamisam Alma Chayshol Chashin Afka Tzalhu B'Safek Rachok Yosakar Shehargeim Takef. He's talking about the people who came into the camp over there. Over there was more likely they would kill them than save them. So that was also Safek Rachok Miod, that would be Nitzos. That's the Dimyon, how he can make the percentage lower. If you look at quotation at the end of paragraph, we have C over here. He says, therefore, l'chaysha shafshu rufu safek rachav sheisrap b'yosek karv she'amos mekam kamuter. So Moshe, says it nachamo, just in case he didn't get it up until now. In quotation D, if you just bring your line from right to left, he says, vada yom slasos ani afshu safek rachav sheispapim lo yisrapa v'zayom es kaidem. Once again, so zokt thermo, 4 times the ibri chazes, afilu safek rachamel. So if you didn't get it the first time, he wants to make sure you didn't miss it. And he points out at number E, this was his psak and also the psak of Rav Henkin. So we now have Rabbi Yisai in this camp, think about it, safek rachamel, the Achiezer, Chaim Moshe Grazinski, Rav Moshe Feinstein, Rav Henkin. You're talking about Mamish major poskim, contemporary poskim dalim. And therefore, that's the way, and they're rejecting the Mishnas Chachamim, who says it has to be a 50% chance. If you turn to page number 7, Rabbi Yisai, you have over here the Binyan Tzion, and he asked the question, very simple question, didn't the Gemara talk about a guy doing this for a Jew? Like the guy doing the operation for the Jew. The guy in the Aram camp saving us. So maybe only a Goyish, a doctor, a matzal can do these types of sakana things to do a potential operation, but maybe a Jewish doctor doesn't have the ability or the license to do such. Maybe Mishpat Teira are magdaras. So Zokt the Binyan Sion, very simple. He says at the end of the day, the Gemara Bible talk about a Goyish, a doctor, but Gersi Abanav were Jews. They made the decision to put themselves at the mercy of the Machne Aram. It wasn't a guy who was making the decision. They made the decision. So if a Jew is able to make the decision to put themselves in a sakana of a rachok for the concept of Chai Shochailam, if they made the decision and Chazal gave their stamp of approval, so it means a doctor, both Jewish patient and doctor, yes, sir.
You could look at it as hafu.
Yeah, let me hear.
The only setback is whether the non-Jewish doctor can do it because it's experimental therapy and he's not going to really be blamed if the guy dies of grits or not have to do it all or whatever because it's a majority chance he's going to die. The Jewish doctor, they're close again that he can do it because you know he's going to give it his all for you.
Yeah, all right, that's a nice svara. It's a very cute. It's a cute svara. But the problem is, what they were dealing with was the Gemara's dimyonos, and you would have wished the Gemara would have given you the question: can a Jewish doctor involve themselves in these activities? Yeah. I hear what you're saying to me. The fact of the matter is, this is a question that I think you posed to me. I think from the very beginning we got together, and that is, do you always have to opt for a Jewish doctor? What about a non-Jewish doctor who has greater expertise? And the psak of the poskim over here is that when it comes to world specialists, we don't make a havchana between Jew and non-Jew, because ego and expertise and knowledge and track record are the crucial factors. Whether the Jew and non-Jew is not the criteria in the ultimate psak, the way the poskim deal with this specific question. If I'm making myself clear. Now, you might feel more comfortable with a Jewish doctor. Maybe if that's the case, I told you there's a concept of bashet when it comes to doctors. So for some reason you feel more comfortable with a Jewish doctor than a non-Jewish doctor, then maybe that's Hashem giving you a siman that, that's the bashet, and they have to use that guy because God chose him as your doctor to be your marapa. Yes?
We didn't discuss yet if the patient has to take that option. Meaning, let's say the patient just says, I'm tired of battling the cancer, I'd rather die in 3 days than have you extend my life for 2 more years, and who knows what the quality of that life is.
So that's going to be...
I'd rather just...
So we're going to deal with that topic after your 2-week vacation. Because the next topic after this, Rabbi Isai, is dealing with terminally ill patients, the euthanasia question, and that's a very powerful big topic.
We don't know what the quality of this person's life is going to be.
Yeah.
Maybe extending his life, but he has to spend the 2 years in a hospital.
The crucial fact is going to be when it comes to that specific topic is what are you doing with the medical care? Are you being marap of the sickness? Are you curing it? Are you at least basically getting rid of its momentary power and therefore curing it on a level but not eradicating it from his body forever? Or are you just merely delaying the inevitable? That's going to be the medical chakira and the halachic chakira, whether or not a person can say thank you and no thank you. And we're going to get very heavy into that because that's a major shayla.
Flip side, if the doctor could administer it against as well.
Yeah, we're going to get to that as well. In this case, Rabbi Yisai, I just want to summarize the final psak of the poskim over here, and that is the following. In order to do this, Rabbi Yisai, you need the following criteria. You need, number one, the refuah has to be a refuah beduka, and I gave you last week various definitions of refuah beduka. Today I pointed out we're mako someplace in between Rashi and the Rambam, which means there has to have been some proof in medical care that it's cured people, even though it's not proved by the FDA yet. So it's not Rashi's refuah beduka, but it can't be something experimental that was never tried before. That cool of the Rambam, most poskim, as far as I have seen in my experience in this, have never used that Rambam. Even it makes sense, yeah. It has to have some type of, proof that it's been experimented and worked. And you have that when it comes to even cancer care, the different levels of trials they use in the hospital when it comes to doing this. So number one has to be your refuah beduka. Number two.
You mean hospital trials? Or what about animal trials? They have like the...
I know. The animal trials on honesty are animal trials.
The compassionate use now, where it's like not approved by the FDA. Someone only has a very specific amount of time to live. They can choose to use that.
Yeah, I mean, if the fact for a guy, they have no problem.
Right, I mean...
Whether a Jew has the right halakha l'maaseh to put yourself into that sakana, I would say there's a heated debate amongst the poskim to do that. I mean, because the fact of the matter is you would have to use the Rambam's psak to do that, and whether or not we go that far, especially dealing with real lethal stuff out there, I would say many people are hesitant. Many people don't want to do trials which are basically in stage number one. They want to do trials stage 2 or 3, where it's already been used on human beings on a limited level to show success. But
some kids with like MD and FD, and Ken Simcha,
yeah.
and kids with courage, those things. I know a bunch of those kids sometimes use experimental drugs that basically have no scientific validity yet. The FDA just will say...
When they say that, which means be careful with that. The FDA doesn't approve anything until it's been used extensively for human care.
Well, they don't approve it for the market, but they approve it for compassionate use, meaning there's a special clause that allows them to release it early, which the drug companies actually don't like because of their bad results. Then they have to shut down trials immediately instead of being able to use the drug. But there are these cases where compassionate use, where people who have like FD and MD, sometimes they can take 10 years to go through these kids who don't have it.
Right.
So they approve it early for these kids in these like placebo trials. I don't know what the head for that really would be based on this issue. I mean, I know
It's a big question. I hear it's a.
there's no validity. They have no idea.
See, over here, we have an idea. See, our case is worse because we know for a fact it's either going to cure you or kill you. There, it might not have any. So there might be easier when it comes to food because of the nature of this specific context, kill or cure, it might have a greater halachic chumrah. And that might therefore answer the question. It's important. It's good we talked it out because it's very important. Now, I happen to be the posek for Kids of Courage. So I deal with these shaylas. All I can tell you is I tell them they're malachim. That's all I can tell you when I see what these people do. These people are malachim. Now, number 2, you have to have rov couple of doctors giving their acquiescence to the diagnosis, to the cure and such, that this most probably could work this way. Number 3, you have to have a Rav Paskin, the heter over here, which is important. And the 4th thing is you have to make sure the person has at least another year's life added to their life to give the Chai Olam validity to undergo this type of process and procedure. When it comes to success, afilu safek rachak miyot seems to be the way most poskim are going over here. Chaim Grzinski, Rav Feinstein, Rav Henkin, the Gedomer are the ones we really are relying upon. But once again, Rabbi Yisai, this is all optionable. It's not halachically required. I'll end with a story to demonstrate this. I once had in my career, going back many, many years ago, when I was still a Rav in Hillcrest in Queens, I'm going back a long time, Chevra. I was still young, I still had, black beard at that time, and but I was already involved in that. It must have been, I would say, years. I was probably about 35 years ago. I had the following case come to me. There was a balabuster in my shul in Hillcrest who told me that her husband is unfortunately in the hospital, the local hospital in Hillcrest, and the doctor said that he is so sick, he was a diabetic and such, that the normal procedures involved in cleaning out his body. Now, what machines clean out a person's body, Rabbi Yisai? Dialysis, correct. That the dialysis machines, which usually are connected to your body's veins and such to help clean out the body, this man, when you analyze all the ports on his body, all of them have closed up. He doesn't have any ports anymore. So there's no way of giving him any type of dialysis. So she says they want to do a new procedure, and they want to know whether I and the family want to acquiesce. So I told her, do me a favor, don't say anything yet. I'm going to come over immediately and speak to the doctors. So I took the doctor in a private room away from the mishpacha, and I said to him, describe to me what the medical situation is, and describe to me what you want to do, and then describe to me how much success you've had with this in the past and why you think it can work over here now. So what the guy said to me was, in actuality, there are no ports or body parts in the open part of his body that we can use anymore. Impossible. What we want to do is take him to the operating room and open his body like you open up a frog and see if we can find any blood vessels we can basically get a hold of to do this type of procedure once they're putting him on dialysis. And if we do, we'll be able to save his life. So I said to him, how many times have you guys ever done this before? So he looked at me and he said, you never did this before. I said, you mean you never did it before? He says, no, the medical world never did this before. So I said, so you're telling me what you want to do over here is use this guy as a guinea pig to try something that's never been done before. You might succeed, you might not succeed, but that wasn't the information given over to the family. They were made to feel that this was a procedure, a last-ditch procedure, tried and tested, and this might be the last way of saving this guy's life. If I didn't come along and start questioning this doctor, this guy would not have gotten off that operating table, and he would have died very quickly. And so they were then their test case might not have succeeded, but the mishpacha would have had no idea where they're heading with this. So I told the family at this point in time, there's no chayilim over here, there's no refu beduka to discuss. Unfortunately, based upon the medical situation now, this is a case of halacha chaspis. Bring the man home, let him die in the house with halacha chaspis, with all the medical equipment. We'll discuss what that means to keep him alive naturally, with all the, we call the care that's needed, not to prevent their death, but to give him the ability to survive. And when it happens, but at least he'll die in peace. The family will be around the bed to the last minute. They'll see love and compassion. He still was alert enough to know what's going on. And they'll have what a misa yafeh. So they took him home, and they set up a hospice in the house. And it was a halachic hospice. For that week, the kids came. They sang zemiros and talked Torah, whatever it is. His body, because it wasn't ongoing dialysis, started to, quite obviously, poison itself because it couldn't cleanse itself. And as a result of that, the body starts to shake. So you were able to see that happening. But he died in the bosom of his family. He lived whatever chayisha he had left, b'derech kavod. But it shows you how important it is for a Rav to not just listen to what The family is told, but you got to take the doctor and sit him on the side and ask him the questions like I asked to find out what's the reality over here. And that made all the difference for this guy when it comes to the ultimate result. The wife is a sworn chassidus of mine to this very day. I now live in Lawrence. At that time, I was a Rav in Hillcrest. She ultimately, my husband died. She got married. She lives now in the 5 towns. And every Tuesday, I give a shiur for women. She's there, one of the earliest, because she's always makatov. That you basically give my husband at least whatever life was left, the derech kavod. That's the least you can do for a person, giving them a misi yafeh. So we'll get more into this after we come back from the vacation. Rabbi Isai, it was Geshmaka interchange today. And Baruch Hashem, I think we will mechaven to the emes. Hashem shouldn't test us, but we should now know the parameters over here. And the next class, I'm going to give you a special Maramakamas, you'll see. And you'll find the next topic. If you thought this was interesting, you ain't seen nothing yet when it comes to terminally ill. That, I would say today, is one of the most hottest topics in the world of medicine halacha when it comes to these topics over here. Rabbi, enjoy your vacation.